Good afternoon, adventurers. Welcome to the channel, welcome back. For those who have been here before, I'm Half-Sanity, I'm Jacob if you prefer, and I like to talk about D&D because I like to play D&D. I also like video games, and I've been replaying, I should say, the Shantae games recently, or at least some of them, and it's re-inspired me to pull a build off of the back burner that I've been cooking for some time. Sort of off and on. Like, should I make this character? Should I not make this character? Oh, look, there are a bunch of new rules because it's 2024. Let's remake the whole thing from the ground up. But here we are, finally, actually buckling down and getting a Shantae-themed, inspired, whatever word you want to use for it, build together. For those unfamiliar, Shantae is a series of action platformer adventure-style games made by a moderately sized studio called Wayforward. They're charming, they're fun, and they star a character of the same name that is a Half-Genie heroine, so known as the Half-Genie Hero, and hey, wouldn't you know it, D&D has a Half-Genie species that we can play as player characters. The Genasi, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I've heard it a few ways, that were originally printed in the Princes of the Apocalypse hardcover campaign, and more recently in Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. They are a species descended from genies, who are in the D&D canon powerful elementals, the same way that Aasimar are descended from celestials, and tieflings are descended from fiends. They may come from a long line of elementals, or they could have ancestry somewhere up their family tree, that it was a genie. It could be that their parents or grandparents or great-grandparents lived in an area suffused with elemental energy, and some of that got into the family line. Lineages are weird in D&D, that's the point. It could simply be that one of the parents is a genie and one is humanoid, much like the case of Shantae herself in those games. The point is, we can play as a Genasi, and there are even 4 different variants, one for each of the Greek elements, or Avatar The Last Airbender elements, if you like. So we will have no problem having plenty of options. Shantae herself has a sort of Arabian Nights, belly dancer, Jasmine from Aladdin sort of thing going on aesthetically, and luckily the Player's Handbook 2024 has provided for us a variant of Bard that specializes in dance. How perfect is that? Dance bards, in addition to being full casters, can make unarmed strikes with dexterity, perfect for whipping enemies with our hair, the way Shantae does with her ponytail. It's a little curly for that, but I tried. And can even deal damage with unarmed strikes equal to a roll of their Bardic Inspiration die plus modifier, strength or dexterity, which is higher, instead of 1 plus strength as usual for an unarmed strike. They also get armor class equal to 10 plus their dexterity plus their charisma modifier when not wearing armor, much like monks do, but with charisma instead of wisdom, and can even make unarmed strikes as part of any action, bonus action, or reaction with which they spend their Bardic Inspiration. That's all looking pretty good for a Shantae-type character, but the downside is dance bards don't get extra attack. Shantae also has some magical abilities, some transformations powered by dance, and some more traditional spellcasting, little fireballs and whatnot. Bards are full casters, so that part is covered. The transforming can come online at level 7 when we get access to the polymorph spell, although level 7's a little late and 4th level spell slots are a little expensive, so let's look to a different class, one that is built entirely for turning into beasts of various types. The Druid, of course, has the wild shape feature starting at level 2, which is perfect for any character who needs to transform into a bunch of different animals to traverse the environment, solve little puzzles, things like that. How much that'll come up in D&D is up to your group and your DM a bit, the campaign that you're playing, but wild shape is nonetheless a fun and interesting thing to do, regardless of what's happening in the campaign. Now that said, druids don't get the unarmed strike stuff that dance bards do, so we're gonna have to turn to the old faithful multi-classing in order to really get to the heart of what a Shantae build, I think, would look like. Because while wild shaping into various animals for in and out of combat use is very cool and interesting, we should also be prepared to do combat outside of our wild shape forms as well. The simplest solution to making a Shantae-like build would probably be to just be a Genasi Moon Druid and call it a day, but for a slightly more complex multi-class build, let's mix in some Monk. I know that's not the words Dance Bard, but for a slightly more complex but more accurate character, let's mix in some Monk. It is not a novel concept that Monk and Druid work together. After all, they are both based in wisdom, and a bit of dexterity, of course. And Druids don't wear armor in wild shape anyway, so with Monk, they never have to. The Monk's suite of offensive and defensive features apply in wild shape because wild shape explicitly lets us keep our class features, so we have all of that going for us, even in the form of whatever beasts we choose. Now, before I leave Dance Bard by the wayside, I do want to say it does fit better than Monk thematically, but for melee combat, Monk is just going to work better, unfortunately. I've been trying to put this together as a Dance Bard build for some time now, and it's just simply better to be Monk. I do want to make a Dance Bard build, and I will. And I will post it right here on the channel, probably in another week or two, depends how long it takes me to actually get the build itself together, and then recording and everything takes time. Bard is really nice to support our teammates, give them bardic inspiration for their roles and such. They get a lot of nice support magic, although Druids get quite a bit of support magic as well, so we won't be missing that side of things too much by going Monk instead. And if we're trying to play as a platform-hopping action hero, Monk is going to give us that flair a bit more. Before we launch into the build, though, there are a couple things we should go over. A couple of rules interactions that we should go into this on the same page about. Wild Shape is a big old pile of talk with your DM first, and that's just kind of the nature of having a feature that is so broad and open-ended, has so many different beasts we could potentially turn into, and has kind of ambiguous rules on what we can accomplish in that form. The first thing I want to go over is that any creature in the game, period, can make an unarmed strike. That is a general rule, that is a thing every creature is capable of no matter what. Unarmed strikes typically deal 1 plus the creature's strength mod damage, but if we have features, for example Monk, that alter the way unarmed strikes work, those apply in Wild Shape, because like I said, we get to keep our class features. So to give an example, if we're a Monk 1, Druid 2, in the shape of, let's say, a common house cat, we could use the house class claw attack and deal 1 piercing damage, or maybe it's slashing, I would have to double check. Instead, we can use an unarmed strike, do bludgeoning damage instead, for 1d6 plus 2, because cats have a dexterity modifier of plus 2. Because of that, we're going to want to keep an eye on when our unarmed strikes may be stronger than a beast's own attacks in its stat block, keeping in mind that the modifier is going to change based on the beast's strength and dexterity scores. Second, and speaking of a beast's own attacks, we can use a beast's attack twice once we have the Monk's extra attack feature. I'll talk about that more once we get to level 5 in Monk, but I just want to be upfront about that in the video, try and clear these things up before they come up. That even applies when a creature has a multi-attack variation that doesn't normally allow for the same attack to be used twice. For example, the CR3, that's challenge rating 3, Giant Scorpion, can make 2 attacks with their claws and 1 with their tail, stinging an enemy for extra poison damage. With extra attack, we could opt to use the sting twice in a turn, instead of making any claw attacks at all. That comes out technically about 6 damage a head, so worth it, maybe, maybe not, but it is an option. Or to give a different example of a creature that doesn't have multi-attack that can benefit from extra attack, the challenge rating 3 Killer Whale deals 5d6 plus 4 with its slam attack, and we can do that twice with extra attack. It is an attack option. The creature normally uses it with the attack action. There's nothing at all saying that we can't do that. The extra attack feature says that when we make the attack action, we can attack twice instead of once, and that action is what beasts use to attack. So that all works, rules as written. So let's get started with a level of Monk, Genasi, of course. We can pick whichever element we like. It won't affect the build too much. Just give us different options for cantrips and such that we can use. As a brief overview, Air Genasi get to hold their breath indefinitely and get an extra 5 feet of movement speed. That is their base speed being 35, so that probably won't transfer over to Wild Shape. Earth Genasi get to ignore difficult terrain, which is very nice, and they can cast their cantrip, Blade Ward, a number of times per day equal to their proficiency bonus as a bonus action instead of an action. That's pretty interesting because of how they changed that cantrip. Now it subtracts 1d4 from enemy attack rolls against us, so doing that as a bonus action is pretty sweet. Water Genasi can breathe air and water and get a swim speed, and every Genasi gets a cantrip and a couple of spells that they can cast starting at 3rd and 5th levels for the leveled spells. So pick the one that you like best, that fits your idea for the character best. It's going to be a Half-Genie either way. Similarly, our origin feat choice isn't going to make or break the build. Pick whichever one you like most. Tavern Brawler is a good fit because we are going to be making unarmed strikes. Rerolling ones is going to be pretty sweet for getting a little bit of extra damage in the moment. If you look at the average damage and Tavern Brawler's effects on that, it's not actually a huge boost, but in the moment, turning a 1 into something that's not a 1 does feel really nice. Musician also fits the theme really nicely, and is a little redundant if anyone else in the party has it, but as long as one person in the party has it, it's a very good buff for the members of your group. And of course, Tough, Healer, Lucky, Skilled, Alert, and Magic Initiate all have plenty of uses as well. Pretty much any origin feat is going to be a good choice as long as you know how to lean into it. I think the only one I wouldn't recommend outright is Savage Attacker because we simply aren't going to be using weapons. Altogether, that gives us Unarmored Defense, Martial Arts, a cantrip that uses Wisdom, and whatever our origin feat gave us. Pretty solid start for level 1. Monks are also just strong in tier 1 because of their ability to make 2 attacks in 1 turn. Next level, we'll start with Druid, multiclassing real early. We want to get the core of the build in as soon as we can so that we can really start feeling like the character we're trying to emulate. So having Wild Shape next level, and having Martial Arts and Unarmed Defense and all that, Unarmored Defense I should say. At this level, we mostly just get a handful of spells and a couple of cantrips. Nothing too definitive for the build yet, but it gets us closer to Druid 2, and at Druid 2, we get Wild Shape, the core of the build. We already, at level 3, have all the pieces in place. We have Wild Shape, we have Martial Arts, we have an Armored Defense. We are the Half-Genie Hero, already at level 3. Build over, video done! No, I'm kidding, that's a joke. We do have some limitations on our wild shaping. Our beast forms that we choose have to be of a challenge rating of 1/4 or lower, and they can't involve a fly speed. That's fine, as half of that restriction is going away in 1 level. As we reach Druid level 3, total level 4, we can take the Druid subclass Circle of the Moon. That means that our beast forms can now be of a challenge rating equal to 1/3 of our Druid level, rounded down, so challenge rating 1 right off the bat. We still can't use flying forms, but that's totally okay. We get more temporary hit points, and even though we can choose stronger beasts, keep in mind we don't have to, as a lot of our offensive capabilities are going to be coming from the Monk, and we don't have to worry about the HP of a beast form's normal stat block, as we simply get temporary hit points now. We also have a static armor class in Wild Shape equal to 13 plus our Wisdom modifier, so 16 at this level, and that is actually above the AC of almost every beast creature in the game. There are only a few, even if we look outside of the monster manual to other sort of campaign books and other source books, there are only a handful that have 16 or 17 armor class, and none of them have more than 17 AC. Every beast in the entire game, unless you're going to third-party and homebrew stuff that I don't know about, is going to have 17 or less. So we don't need to worry about our armor class in Wild Shape, ever. After that, let's move back into Monk and get our other subclass. This one is a little less important of a choice, so if you would like to go against what I'm about to say and pick a different subclass that you feel fits your character better, by all means do that. I mean, that kind of always applies, it's your character, but it's not as important as being a moon druid, is what I'm trying to convey. The choice I'm going with, though, is the Warrior of the Four Elements. It has the flair of elementals that we have already based our character on, and it gives us some pretty cool abilities as well. Mechanically, it's pretty sound. At the start of any turn, we can use one focus point to activate our Elemental Attunement feature, giving us not only the ability to deal elemental damage with our unarmed strikes instead of bludgeoning, which is already very nice, which means we can choose an advantageous damage type if we're against certain enemies, and we also get some other benefits when we use an elemental unarmed strike. We get 10 feet of extra reach, which is a ton of extra reach. We now outreach polearms. How cool is that? We can stay 15 feet away from creatures and just slap them silly. We can also push creatures back 10 feet when we hit them with unarmed strikes. That is pretty much like the Warlock repelling blast thing. At this level, we also get deflect attacks, which is a very nice defensive feature that we can use to protect our hit points and our temporary hit points even. And we also get the Elementalism cantrip, which is more for role-playing and flavor than anything, but could be useful in certain situations if we want to light or snuff fires, that kind of thing. A 4th monk level finally gets us our first feat. Like we haven't been getting good features all along the way anyway. I don't feel like this is terribly late as it comes in. I don't feel like that's a terribly huge loss, given the importance of the features that we've gotten along the way. We're going to round out our dexterity by grabbing the grappler feat, also allowing us to move at full speed when we have a creature grappled, give ourselves advantage on attack rolls against creatures that we are grappling, and we can also hit a creature with an unarmed strike and grapple them as part of the same attack, which is a super nice use of our action economy. It might be a little inconvenient to determine the DC for our grapples because our strength and dexterity are going to be changing when we wild shape, but that's just addition. That shouldn't be too hard. Plus, some creatures have grappling built into their attacks, like for example a giant crab or the giant scorpion I mentioned earlier. So when we use that claw attack, we can just automatically grapple the target if we hit. That doesn't even use the grappler unarmed strike grapple thing. That's just a thing that is built into the beast stat block. And no matter how the grapple is initiated, whether it's with an unarmed strike or with a beast attack, the benefits of this feat do apply. Next, we'll take monk level 5 and snag that sweet, sweet extra attack. At this point, no matter what animal form we're in, including none, we consistently can dish out 3 to 4 attacks, dealing a d8 plus our dexterity or strength modifier each time. That modifier may change as we change animal forms, but it should be a pretty reliable amount of damage either way. And a lot of the time we'll be dealing elemental damage types and attacking from 15 feet away anyway. Starting at this level, we can also use Stunning Strike to CC an enemy into the ground, frankly. Being stunned is hugely debilitating. It's a great feature overall. Swinging back to Druid for a bit, we can grab a cool +2 to Wisdom, now that we are Druid 4. It's not glamorous, but it is mechanically sound. It's a good thing to do. Our spell attack bonus and save DC increase, as do our armor class, both in and outside of Wild Shape. And like I was saying earlier, now we have 17 AC in Wild Shape, the best that any beast in the game has. One of Shantae's spells, or items in the earlier games, it changes a little bit each game, involves spawning a little storm cloud to zap lightning onto the ground beneath it, and we can do a much bigger, much nastier version of that with the spell I really like called Call Lightning, and at Druid level 5 we get that. It is on the Druid list. We also get a bunch of other spells, I guess. Aura of Vitality and Conjure Animals are two of my favorites as well, and we can also cast Conjure Animals while we're in Wild Shape, which makes it all the sweeter. At this level, we also gain the ability to replenish a use of Wild Shape without using any sort of action by spending a spell slot of any level. meaning we can wild shape way more times than we could leading up to this. Up until now, it's only been 2 per long rest, plus another 1 every short rest. At this point, I want to summarize, we are level 10, both 5 monk and 5 druid. It's come out a very even split for the builds I usually make. And we are going to swing back into monk for a bit in a moment here, but druid will mostly catch up. It's not going to end up a perfectly even split, but we'll get there. Monk level 6 gives us a unique ability to fire off a 20-foot radius AoE blast in one of those elemental damage types. It's functionally very similar to the Fireball spell, except that it isn't a spell, which means we can use it in wild shape, and it deals 3d8 damage of one of the elemental damage types. It doesn't have to be fire, it can be lightning, cold, thunder, or acid as well. As a multi-class character who has spellcasting, we won't be hurting for AoE as much as a single-class monk would be, but it is still very nice to have an AoE option we can fire off in wild shape. Imagine being like a goblin bandit, and a fish swims up the river that we're camping next to, and pops its little fish head out of the water, and just spews lightning onto what is now a battlefield. Awesome. Absolute cinema. And at 6th level in Monk, we also gain another 5 feet of movement speed, which I should probably talk about. We do, as far as I can tell, get that bonus to movement speed in wild shape because it does come from a class feature. That's one of those things that you're going to want to talk to your DM about, whether it increases your out of wild shape speed, which then gets fully replaced by the wild shape, or whether it applies like a class feature after. Personally, I'm on the side of just let players have their fun with stuff like this, so my vote is in the unarmored movement applies column, but talk to your DM, as per usual. And at monk level 6, we can also choose to use force damage with our unarmed strikes. That does not activate the other benefits that we get with elemental attunement, though, so no extra reach and no pushing creatures 10 feet. Those only apply if we deal elemental damage, so keep that in mind, though it is good to have force damage in our pocket, either if we're fighting something that is resistant to all the elemental damage types, which do exist, or if we're not using elemental attunement because it's a small battle or something, and we just want to deal something that isn't bludgeoning damage. Monk 7 is a quick one, comes with the excellent evasion feature, huge defensive buff. Anytime we make a dexterity saving throw, we take at most half damage, but often no damage. Phenomenal. Good stuff. Monk level 8 comes with our 3rd feat, which we'll use to grab Speedy. It gives us another 10-foot bonus to our speed. Again, check with your DM if it applies in wild shape. I'm on the side of the fence that says it does, but, talk to your group. If your DM won't allow that to apply in wild shape, consider another feat. There are plenty of good ones that give dexterity. And this feat might seem like overkill with monk speed and potentially fast base beast forms as well, but we really can't have too much of that good thing, and there is a reason to stack up the buffs that we'll get to in a few more levels, so bear with me. The feat also lets us ignore difficult terrain if we dash, which we can easily do as a bonus action. So that is all the sweeter. I will say if you chose the Earth Genasi and you're already ignoring most difficult terrain, this is a little less desirable, but I'll leave that up to you to determine whether it's still worth it. Monk level 9 is a somewhat small boost, though it can situationally be really useful to run around on the top of a liquid surface or on a vertical surface like a wall. Both really good things when they come up. Monk 10, however, is a big level. We get an upgrade to all of our Monk's Focus bonus action abilities, like Flurry of Blows now lets us do 3 attacks instead of 2. That is a 50% damage increase. Step of the Wind allows us to take a creature with us. That can be a separate creature than 1 or 2 that we are grappling, so we could potentially grab our party and just take the whole party with us if we want. Remember that you can choose to fail saving throws, so if your teammate tries to grapple you and you want that to happen, it happens. Or we can use it to drag around our enemies and an ally. The creature does have to be willing for Step of the Wind, so keep that in mind. Patient Defense also gives us temporary hit points now, which may be more or less useful depending how our temps are doing from Wild Shape. Having multiple reliable sources of temporary hit points can be really nice. It can also be a bit redundant, so it'll be a little situational, but it's nice to have on hand. Monk 11, total level 16, is another huge one though. It bumps our martial arts die up to a D10, which isn't a huge damage bonus on its own, but given the sheer amount of attacks we are capable of making, can be quite nice. It also gives us a very cool subclass feature. You know how druids have to be level 8 to choose wild shape forms that can fly? Well, we can sort of get around that. Now that we have 11 levels in Warrior of the Elements Monk, when our elemental attunement buff is active, we gain a swim speed and a fly speed equal to our walking speed. Now you probably see why we're taking those buffs like the speedy feat. A perfectly normal wild shape form like a badger or a direwolf can now have a fly speed of 50 or 80 feet. That lightning spewing piranha from earlier, 35-foot fly speed. Winged reef shark? Sure, why not? One more level of monk gets us our penultimate feat, and we're just gonna take wisdom +2. Again, it's not glamorous, it's not the most exciting, but it does cap us out at 20 wisdom, which is mechanically beneficial. From here out, we're going to swing back into Druid. Level 6 isn't huge, but we do gain another use of Wild Shape before resorting to spell slots, which is just nice. We can also choose CR2 Beast forms, which are an upgrade from the CR1s, although our damage, again, is probably going to be coming mostly from Monk at this point. Doing a Flurry of Blows is going to outdamage what most Beast forms are capable of with their actions. It just is what it is. Starting at this level, we can also add our Wisdom modifier to Constitution saving throws while we are in Wild Shape, which means if we cast a spell and then change into a beast form, or if we cast a spell like Conjure Animals that requires concentration while we are in beast form already, we have an easier time maintaining our concentration on that spell. And last, we can replace the damage from our beast attacks, not unarmed strikes, the attacks in the beast stat block, with radiant damage, which is hardly ever resisted or immune. Druid level 7 brings 4th level Druid spells, including our cast in wild shape spell, Fount of Moonlight, which is a really nice one that adds 2d6 radiant damage to all of our attacks. All of our melee attacks specifically, which is going to be a lot of attacks. Again, monk levels. That's a total of 10d6 per turn if we hit with all 5 of our unarmed strikes. That is an average of 35 damage, which is pretty huge. In hindsight, it may have been better to grab that earlier, but we also only have so many spell slots of 4th level and higher, and we've been getting monk buffs along the way, so it works out. We can also pick up Conjure Minor Elementals for slightly more damage. That's a tired old dead horse to be beating, but it is in the game, it is possible. But Fount of Moonlight is already prepared automatically for us, and we can cast it in Wild Shape, instead of having to cast Conjure Minor Elementals and then Wild Shape after casting it. We also get a feature that adds 1d8 to our beast attacks, again, not unarmed strikes, but the ones in the beast stat block. It might be wise to make a little table on your character sheet that has unarmed strike buffs and beast attack buffs. I think when I make a paper sheet for this character, I'm probably going to do that. We could alternately take a feature that adds our wisdom modifier to the damage we deal with cantrips, but if we're dealing cantrips as this character, that means we're not taking a battle very seriously anyway. We have spells and we have monk attacks, so we don't really need the cantrip. And finally, Druid level 8, character level 20, the capstone, the finale, our epic boon feat. There are plenty of great options, as always. If we want to be a little cheeky, we could take the boon of speed and have an additional 30 feet at all times to fly around even faster. Otherwise, the boons of recovery, fortitude, and the night spirit are strong defensive options, making us tankier as we are frontline fighters. And I also want to mention, if your group allows the whole multi-classing 2 epic boons thing, if your last 2 levels get ability score increases or feats, that is raw. That is a thing you can do. It is not allowed in Adventurers League, which is why I'm calling it out specifically. So if you're in Adventurers League, or if you're just at a table that doesn't allow it, follow the build as I've already said. If your group does allow it, just wait to take your last monk level until the very end, or right before you take the last druid level. The order of those two doesn't really matter. And in that case, instead of the speedy feat, you could take the boon of speed and just get more movement speed, or you could take one of the other ones. There are plenty of really, really solid options. Epic boon feats are strong for some reason. So there we have it. A Shantae-inspired build that has been a while in the making. It probably doesn't seem like it since you're seeing the end result, but I have been starting to put this build together, rewriting parts of it, reworking the character in my head, putting it back on the shelf for a while and taking it back out long enough that I had to redo the whole thing for the 2024 rules that came out over a year ago. So it feels good to get it out of my head onto the page, proverbially. We'll make an actual character sheet for her at some point in the near future, but that's for me to worry about. It's my character that I'm playing. I feel lighter somehow. Now all that's left is to put her stats on the page and play. But anyway, that's all I have to say for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, I appreciate you. If you didn't make it all the way to the end, you're not seeing this. I appreciate you anyway. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and whip your hair back and forth. I whip my hair back and forth. I whip my hair back and forth. I can't. That's a copyrighted song. And I will see you in the next video next week. I am doing my very best to post these regularly. We'll see how that works out. It's surprisingly difficult. Let me know in the comments if you've played a monk druid before. I know it's not a new thing. I would love to hear your stories, and I will see you in the next one. Whatever that happens to be. Should be a week from now, although there will probably be a short or two in the meantime. Kind of trying to release a video on Sunday and then a short or two during the week. Kind of see how it shakes out. In any case, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.